So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our friend Michael, who, let me mute the music here. Our friend Michael, who is going to be talking about his experiences with photogrammetry. He's going to be telling us a little bit about what that means and maybe how to do it. And it's very interesting. He actually made he made a work trip to Cambodia to do 3D distance mappings of temple complexes there, and he's going to be showing those temple complex data sets alongside his presentation so we can get a better understanding of photogrammetry. So everybody please give our friend Mike a round of applause, digitally of course.
Hello, PIGSquad. My name is Michael Hill. I am a freelance software developer here in Portland, Oregon, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about photogrammetry, which is the process of turning photos into 3D models. I'm going to cover two things mainly in this little talk. The first is how to take photos for photogrammetry, and then a specific piece of software, in this case, which is RealityCapture. So before we get started, I wanted to show what the results of doing photogrammetry can look like. So here we have a temple in Kokare, Cambodia, and this was done with several hundred photos. The photos were captured using a DJI Mavic Pro. You can use any kind of digital camera. A cell phone works fine. You can use a single lens reflex if you have one of those as well. So really, any kind of image capture device can be used for this as long as they're in focus. So the first thing we want to do is get RealityCapture. And you can do that by going to their website, capturingreality.com. You can see that here highlighted in the top right. The software is free to download. It's free to do all of your practice on. The only thing that costs money is when you want to actually export the model. So the first part that we want to talk about is how do we capture the photos? What is the process to make sure that all those photos are organized and that we get good coverage of the object that we're trying to scan? So here in Unity, I have made a little bit of a mock-up to show some examples of how you want to do your photography. In this particular instance, we are assuming that we can only walk if we have like a phone or a digital camera. We don't have a drone, we can't do anything along those lines, but we want to capture this object. A good way to do this is to simply just walk around it. So a simple path like this will get good coverage of most of the object. You obviously won't be able to get the top, and there's not really any way around that, but you can get some really good scans out of that nonetheless. If you do have a drone though, you basically can take the same walk around process and do it at multiple levels. And we'll see this in RealityCapture when we get down into actually doing the processing. We'll see some similar results like this. One thing to note in all of this is that you want a little bit of overlap between your photos, say about 30 to 50%, because the way that the computer creates the geometry is it looks at similarities between the two images and uses that to figure out the depth and distance of those objects from the camera. So you have to have similar points of reference between two images to know where they are. And then, of course, our last one down here at the bottom, this last and final example, is a more stationary example for in the event that we're just scanning like this close facade. If you wanted to scan some graffiti or something along those lines, this technique works really well, where you basically create a grid. So you can see from one particular position, we're aiming up high, and then as we move our camera down and down and down and down, we have a sweep of photos that we have, which makes this nice little sort of overlapping grid. And then we step, horizontally to the side and repeat that process a couple more times. And when that's done, you get a nice sort of grid like this. So you can see that we get these squares because the images are nicely overlapping. So with this in mind, we're going to take photos that were done with this method and bring them into RealityCapture for processing. So once you have RealityCapture installed, this is going to be the first scene that you see. This is your basic layout. And it's a little bit different than most other 3D software that you might be familiar with. It handles a little bit different than Maya. It handles a little different than Blender. So I'll go over the controls as well as we move through this. The main thing to note is this center space. This is where your model will appear as you start working through it. Left click will allow you to pan around in the space. The middle wheel will scroll in and out. and scrolling focuses around the space that your mouse is in. So if you want to zoom into a specific part in a scene, you just put your mouse over that and it will zoom into that particular location. And then right will be used to tumble around our model. So the first thing we want to do is take all the photos that we've captured already and simply drag and drop all of them into the interface. So I'm dragging these off screen. I'm just going to let them go. They can go anywhere. You can see it's going to take a minute to process. It's got some images. Right here, I have 376 images that we've dropped in. Great. So across the top, you'll see our main sort of, I guess it's a ribbon, is what Windows likes to call it. This first workflow kind of has all of your main basic controls in it, but we don't need to worry about a whole lot of this right now. You can also change your settings, which is good to know. That's kind of different than the Windows convention with the typical drop downs across the top. So what we'll do is we'll click on alignment and align images. And this will run the math process to figure out where all the images are in reference to each other and build a rough point cloud that we can then use for doing our actual model. We'll push this and come back when it's done. Okay, so now we're done. It took about 9.5 minutes to process all 376 of these images. So now that this is done, you can see here in the middle, we have a sort of nice point cloud representation of what it is that we've scanned. And you can see sort of here how I did the grid pattern with the drone. So this vertical lines here as I moved around, another specific example. And the computer seems to have done a pretty good job overall at figuring this out. But if you want the specific metrics, you can look here on the left-hand side and see that I have a couple different results here in this column. One is small components. And so sometimes it's not able to align images specifically with the rest of the group. And so it will break them off into individual models or individual small pieces. So here you can see I have 10 different components, it looks like. And I can step through these and see what these look like and how many images they use. And we can fix this and align those, but that is going to be for a different talk that I will give at a different time. You can see here also we have two other larger components. The large one here, component 0, actually is our main model. It used 199 of 376 images. And overall, I think this looks pretty good. So I'm not going to bother with fixing this one right now. And then here with component 10, you can see there was a part of this temple that was a wall that went around the outside, and I took my drone and flew over it with the camera facing down and went around the edge. And you can kind of see exactly how that went down. You can see a little bit of that, but we also don't want this for this particular scan. All we're really concerned about is here component 0. And so we'll go about cleaning this up and fixing it up. So you can see as we look around, there is a lot of extra information that we don't need. And you can see trees and ground and things along those lines. We really just want the main temple itself. So what we can do is we can click on the box here, this white box, and you'll see that it changes a little bit. We now have handles here on the sides and the top and the bottom that allow us to crop this down into the space that we want to actually process into a 3D model. So if I left click on one of these and drag, I can just pull this in, and we'll left click and drag here and here. And that's looking pretty good. And that's, it's a little off kilter. So what we can do is go up here to Reconstruction, click on this tab, and right here we can see Set Ground Plane. So if we click on that, see down here, there's a little gimbal that shows up that will allow us to sort of rotate all of this in such a way that we can line up this model so it's a little more vertical. So we'll just tweak that a little bit and tweak it this direction a little bit. And that looks pretty good overall. So now our next step is to decide how we want to reconstruct this. And ideally, since this is PIGSquad, we could do, a video game model. So our first step on all of that is to just click normal detail. And this will start the process that turns this 3D point cloud into an actual three-dimensional model. Let's do that. All right, fantastic. That took about 20 minutes. And you can see here now we have a fairly nice representation of the geometry of this temple. A little bit of an area here that's a problem, which is fine. There's a lot of plants in this particular area. We have a little bit of a problem here with some trees that were hanging out and left some branches up in the air. To clean this up, what we do is we go up here to the lasso tool. We click it, and we simply can just go through, kind of circle those. We'll grab this little bit that's floating in the air too. See, those are highlighted, and then we click filter selection. We click filter selection, take a minute, do a little bit of processing, and 3 seconds later, boom, it's gone. So now we have a little bit of cleanup there. Let's see if we see anything else that we want to get rid of. I think a little bit of a problem area here, but these edge cases I usually take, I export this and clean up in Blender and then re-import. We'll also do that in a more advanced video at a later point. We'll clean that up as well. We'll go ahead and just like clip off this little bit. And this is looking pretty good. Now we've got a few places with holes. So we'll just click this button, check topology. So this will clean up a lot of the problems that we have. We'll sit here and let it do this really quick. Doesn't take very long. So here's sort of a report of everything that we have wrong with this. And we can go through now that we've checked all of that and clean our model. Okay, looks pretty good. Looks like we got some of those holes cleaned up. So now, like I said earlier, we're going to say that we want to export this for a video game. So what we need to go in here and do is we click on component to expand it. We can see all of the different modifications of this model that we've done. This is the very first model that we had, and then we deleted a few things, and so this is current model. You can see this has 8.2 million triangles in it, which is a bit more than what we really need for a video game model. So what we want to do is we want to go and click this simplify tool. We see settings for this tool. Our target triangle count, which this, I don't know what the default here is. I've already set it to 50,000, which is what we want for this particular model. We can simply just type in the number that we want to target for our poly count. So we'll do 50,000. It's already in there, but we'll do it again. Then click simplify. So, all right, that took about 30 seconds. You can see here, looks pretty good, I think, overall. You can see now that we did our processing on these models. We were looking at model 5 before. So this is still preserved. We can still use this model if we want to for something else, if we wanted to keep a high poly count model, or if we wanted to bake normals in Blender so that we could take this model and project it onto the lower resolution model to fake some detail. We can do that. But you can see here with our current model, we have 50,000 tries and we're looking pretty good. So our next step is to texture this. And that is as simple as going up here to texture and clicking that button. And there we have it. About 6 minutes later, we have a very nicely textured model. You can see that I took this on a sunny day. Ideally, we want to shoot these photos when your light is even and perhaps on an overcast day, but I didn't really have a choice on that. This was the one that we're doing that day, and so we had to make do with what we could. Now we have our model with an 8K texture on it, ready for export. And so we can just go over here and click export mesh. Now, at this point, if you haven't used your images before, it may ask you to finish a payment process for registering all the images that we've used. In this case, I've already done that because you saw the model at the beginning on the screen. And the cost is calculated per image. And with this model, if I remember correctly, it was like less than $2. But once you've paid to register those images once, you can use them over and over and over again and don't have to pay again. So we will click to save this model. I'll replace the one that I already have in here. So we have some settings options here. These settings by default Quickly OK, and just hit OK. That pretty much wraps everything up. If you're interested in seeing this model, you can check it out on Sketchfab. You can just simply go to sketchfab.com/wildparadox, which is my username on all social media platforms, including Instagram and Twitter, and on Discord. So if you have any questions or need help with anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help with anything that you might have an issue with. There are also a few other models on here that you can check out that have been done as part of the CoCare complex. And there will be more coming up in the future. Thanks a lot.
Alrighty, thank you, Michael. So amazing to see that. It's so awesome to see that that process, and also like, thanks for breaking down that idea of just like, this is the step-by-step, like this is how much it costs, this is how long these certain things take and everything. I think it's really, really worthwhile to see that, because it makes it a little bit more realistic for somebody else to consider to do it. And also that extra kind of, that extra step of thinking like, cool, how would this, actually work in a game? Like, how would I do this and put something into a game? I think is really important. But man, yeah, what an awesome kind of just project this is, and it sounds like there's so many different things that we would be able to see after this. You're mentioning a lot of follow-up presentations that could happen from this, and I agree. There's so much to learn about this. So thank you so much. We'll have to talk more about learning more about what you're doing and everything like that. And as Michael said, if anybody has any questions at all, feel free to post them in the chat here. We have most, if not all, of our presenters tonight are in chat and available to answer questions that I can kind of repeat live and everything like that. But also, as he just said, he is available in the PIGSquad Discord. He's on Twitter and everything like that. Michael's always been pretty accessible for anybody who has questions. And he's also mentioning too that the softwares that he's talking about are all fully free. So think about that when it comes to just wanting to try something out for yourself. Looks like Meshroom is an open source software that he's linking right now, so give that a shot. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mike.